Hey everybody, it's been a long time since I put out a video, maybe about a year. I have two kids, they're really young, it's been an exhausting year, but a beautiful blessing. That being said, let's get right into it. Today we are going to be discussing a favorite children's movie of mine, one that I didn't see till I was older, thank you to my wife, and one that I probably watch very often, and especially more often now that I have two young kids, and that movie is BEDKNOBS and Broomsticks. Now, as I had said previously, my relationship with BEDKNOBS and Broomsticks started years later, maybe only about 10 years ago when I was in my early 30s and my late 20s. I know that sounds odd to get into a children's movie later on in your life, but my wife and I do tend to rewatch movies that we loved when we were younger. I have two young kids, so we are revisiting a lot of these films. BEDKNOBS and Broomsticks tells a very interesting story, a whimsical tale about a witch, Angela Lansbury,
Elbow, henbane, aconite, glowworm fire, firefly light,
who during World War II lives on this really cool coastal remote house, beautiful piece of property by herself. And during the war, a lot of the children who were displaced, who were orphaned, who had to be removed from London during the bombings from the Nazis, had to be taken in and sent out to certain people, to neighbors, to relatives, to whoever could take these children in till the war was over, till there was a place to put them safely or to reunite them with friends and family.
And a bit of a think. A witch she is, says you. Then let's use the old loaf, says I. Let's get back to London. What we have here is an opportunity. She don't want anyone to know she's a witch, does she? Not ruddy likely. That's the opportunity.
So Miss Price, played by Angela Lansbury, is tasked to take these three children who are from London into her home, and she wants nothing to do with this. She wants to be alone. She wants to practice her witchcraft. She has her cat. She has her school of witchcraft that she's doing through via mail.
Here we are. Clasp the broom with both hands. Yes, of course.
She's very whimsical, she's not evil, she's not dark, she's just a loner who wants to be alone.
Oh, I'm sorry, but that's quite out of the question. Children and I don't get on.
Like I said, these three kids come into her possession, she has to watch them by order of the government, so that relationship, that dynamic builds, and we basically learn that she has to go off and has to go find Professor Emelius Brown.
Just think how successful I could be with an assistant who can really do magic.
Oh?
Played by the wonderful David Tomlinson, who you will recognize in a very similar film, Mary Poppins. So she takes these three children, she has her magical bed with a little BEDKNOBS and Broomsticks, that you say where you want to go, you cast a little spell, and they travel off in this weird, like, psychedelic type animation, and they go from place to place to place throughout the movie, finding these pieces that she needs to defend, to come up with this, to master this spell of animation of inanimate objects that she then wants to use to defend the homeland, have the Nazis invade. And she wants to play her part.
Macoides, tricorum, satis dei.
So as they're traveling around, they come across Emelius Brown, played by David Tomlinson, who happens to be the professor who she's been in correspondence with during her witchcraft lessons. Now, what's interesting is he is kind of a showman. He's a magician. His tricks are illusions, and we learn that in a beautiful set number on one of the street corners that they travel to, where there's a lot of vendors, there's a lot of different cultures, there's beautiful dance numbers, and we meet him, and he kind of does his own musical number, showing that he's a huckster. He's not mean, he's not evil, he's not scamming people, but he's kind of just doing his illusions, knowing full well that witchcraft really doesn't exist to him. So when he comes into contact with Miss Price, who sees him as the professor, and he basically says, "Who are you?" And she's kind of along the lines, "Hey, I've been talking to you." You know, he's like, "Oh, shoot, I'm shutting the school down." But what he learns is that her magic is real. So you have this lady, Miss Price, who's the student of Dr. Emelius Brown, Professor Emelius Brown, I should say, and turns out his spells and his lessons have actually worked for a student, to his much surprise. Like, whoa, like I guess it wasn't a scam, or as I should say, an illusion, a magician-like trick after all.
Magic incantations can be framed as decorations, though there's really nothing to it. And of course you all see through it. You love me because I do it.
You have Professor Emelius Brown, you have the three children, three wonderful children played by amazing actors. There's something about their chemistry, especially with Miss Price and Emelius Brown, that really works. And by the end of the film, there's kind of a cohesiveness there with the characters, almost like a family. And they kind of build that up over the course of the movie, and it's really interesting how they do that.
You mean it was there in your book all the time?
Yeah, but nobody ever listens to me.
Now, this movie was released in 1971, so now that's about, what, 30 or so years past World War II. So by this time, a lot of people knew what the war was, the horrors of the war. You know, so the movie, as a children's movie, didn't need to touch on that. And children knew who good versus evil was at this point. So to have World War II as a backdrop definitely grounds the film and puts it in a place that, you know, you appreciate that. You appreciate that this is a real historical event. That's the backdrop, not just some fake thing that's just all magic and all kind of just like goofy.
Miss Price, you do have that entire house to yourself. And according to the order of the Ministry of Civil Defense, you have no choice.
I see. Very well, if that is the case, I shall take them into my house.
That's always there. That's always lingering. And at the end, you know, the Nazis do try to invade, although they never technically invaded England on foot or on the ground. You do have that at the end of this movie, and through her and her family and the kids and Dr. Brown, they come together, and she raises all the museum artifacts in England, and they fight the Nazis off, who happen to come up on shore to do an invasion that night. You have Roddy McDowall, who's been in 1,000 movies, but he plays a wonderful role as a kind of a little cowardly priest who, you know, has ulterior motives for, you know, what he wants and what he's trying to do, but he's not an evil guy, but it's classic Roddy McDowall. And you just have a lot of, you know, British actors and famous people from that era in this movie, and it's a wonderful children's movie, and it reminds me of the classic Disney movies. From 20,000 Leagues to Swiss Family Robinson, Babes in Toyland. It goes on and on and on. There's countless ones. All the classics from those eras where, you know, yes, they were children's movies, but they also had deep themes, as I had said before. There's some action. There's some moments of kind of a little scariness. And, you know, who's that guy? You know, the bookman in this movie.
Please don't annoy me. Give me the book, boy.
Not likely.
Bit of a stalemate, isn't it?
Who threatens them with a knife. You know, as a kid, I'm sure that's creepy. Even as an adult watching that, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You know, that's the way that guy said something, or, you know, the way that shot was set up. You know, that was good. Movies back then took time. They took time on the scripts. They took time in the production.
Really, Buster? Genuine plaster.
A filigree samovar owned by the Tsars.
A pen used by Shelley. A new Botticelli.
They had beautiful musical numbers. They had beautiful set pieces. The animation, yes, obviously there was no CGI. There was no, you know, advanced technology to make your animation seamless. But that's part of the charm of a movie like this. Yes, we know a bed flying through the sky nowadays can be done much more efficiently and much more, I guess, realistically on camera. But I don't care so much about the realism. It's the vibe it gives off in this movie, the psychedelics, the way the shot is on the bed and they're flying over England. And, you know, when they go to the island of Naboo, please forgive me if I got that wrong.
Bobbing along on the bottom of the beautiful briny sea.
It's all animated, like in Roger Rabbit. And this is maybe, what, 15, 20 years before Roger Rabbit? So, you know, they were really starting to integrate a lot of that. But again, the absolute high points of this movie is the setting. I love the cozy setting of the English estates, the countryside, the ocean, the solitude of it all. Musical, comedy, but it's a highly rewatchable film, BEDKNOBS and Broomsticks. And like I said, my wife and I sometimes will just put these throwback movies on that we grew up with to fall asleep to. And I find myself often putting this on, especially that I have children now. And it's just a timeless movie.
Won't be necessary. They won't be with me for long.
And it's somewhat of a long movie with a running time of 139 minutes. So that's north of 2 hours. And that's, you know, that's a big order for somebody to sit down and watch. And I'll tell you, this movie kind of, whether it's your first time or whether the kids are watching it, it goes by really quickly because it's a good story, has an uplifting ending, and there's a bunch of little arcs within that. You know, you have Angela Lansbury and David Tomlinson's character, Emelius, and Miss Price kind of have a little romance going on there. It's very subtle. Obviously, he's interested in her, but they never overdo it. And at the end, you kind of see that maybe they've come together a little bit there. He's off to war. It's very uplifting. She's committed to adopting the children. Also, I didn't realize that this movie was released on October 7th in 1971. So today, as I'm recording this, it's October 2nd. So that's funny, a little coincidental that I decided to do Bedknobs and Broomsticks around the anniversary of its opening, which would make sense. It is, I guess, witches, cats, does have a Halloween theme, kind of Halloween vibe throughout it.
How does she do that? Because she's a witch. That's the sort of thing witches do.
I always find it fascinating that writers or directors or whoever's involved with a specific story like this one are able to balance the line. I know I've been repeating this over and over, but the fact that World War II is a backdrop, and it was so horrible, especially for citizens in England at the time, because this does take place during the Blitzkrieg, there's subtle moments, like, for example, when Emelius Brown and Miss Price and the kids travel to the bed to where he's squatting for the time being, because there's areas of London that were completely, not necessarily bombed out, but under duress, or a bomb is in the ground and everybody has to be evacuated. So he, I guess, is living at one of these mansions while nobody's there, and there's a missile in the ground. So it's, as a kid's movie, it's, oh, that's funny, haha. But there are realities here that, you know, are the undertone, which, yeah, it was a very scary time for people living there and people all over the world. But in that specific moment, I do love the setting. I do love the coziness of this film. I do love the way the candles and the lights, it feels like England. It is England. It feels like that time period you've been transported off to. And there's something very comforting about this movie, and I'm not sure what it is. And maybe that's just a personal thing. Maybe other people don't feel that way, but there's a very deep warmth to it. And almost harkens you back to a time of deep wholesomeness in this world and in this country. And I'm not trying to sound like a prude by any sense, because, God, look at my channel. Look at some of the reviews I've done. There's movies up there like Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I love. But this movie's highly rewatchable, I think, for that reason. I think there's a comfort there, and I think there's many movies that have that, especially as the years go on and we go back to, like, for example, The Secret Garden that I've reviewed. There's a wholesomeness there. There's a comfortingness there. And I guess maybe as adults, we like watching children's movies because it makes us feel like the kids again, and that's the comforting aspect. And hey, what's wrong with that? But there's certain movies that have that forever and that are timeless, because nowadays a lot of movies just come and go.
Well, to tell you the truth, it does seem a bit old-fashioned.
So if you haven't seen it, if you're a big fan of cinema, if you're a big fan of children's movies, if you're a big fan of classic movies, if you're just a big fan of stories and movies in general, check out Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Totally worth the watch. Your kids will love it, and you'll probably rewatch it multiple times.